Caleb exhaled a long, heavy breath. "You know," he said quietly, "there was someone else who helped us that day. Someone we never got to thank." Oliver tilted his head. "The lady who smelled like flowers." Caleb nodded slowly. "Yeah, lavender. I remember that, too." He looked down at the grave, then back toward the trees lining the edge of the cemetery. "She saved you once. Now, if I ever find her, I swear I'll protect her no matter what." 3 years earlier, life had felt full. Meline was vibrant, always humming some tune under her breath, always organizing family trips to escape the rush of the city. That weekend, she had convinced Caleb to unplug from work, pack up the SUV, and take Oliver camping in the Northern California woods. It was supposed to be a memory-making trip. Instead, it became a nightmare. The wildfire moved faster than anyone predicted. 1 minute they were roasting marshmallows, the next sirens, smoke, and chaos. Rangers rushed through the campground shouting evacuation orders as thick plumes of ash filled the sky. Caleb remembered the panic, grabbing Oliver, calling out for Meline. Then the flames, walls of orange and heat swallowing the trees. He had lost sight of her. With Oliver in his arms, coughing and crying, Caleb had stumbled toward the nearest road, but collapsed, disoriented, choking on smoke. That was when she appeared. A woman dressed in dusty, half-burnt paramedic gear. Blonde hair pulled into a messy braid beneath a helmet. She moved with calm urgency. Without hesitation, she knelt beside him, checked Oliver's breathing, and lifted the child into her arms. "You have to move," she shouted over the roar of fire. Caleb tried to follow, but the smoke swallowed everything. The next thing he remembered was waking up in an emergency shelter, his back bandaged, throat raw. Oliver was there, safe, scared, but alive. Meline had not made it out. Neither had the woman. At least that's what everyone believed. No one at the site knew who she was. She wasn't listed among the hospital staff or the ranger teams. Her name wasn't on any volunteer rosters. She had appeared out of nowhere and vanished the same way. Caleb spent the next year trying to find her. He hired investigators, combed through records, spoke to burn unit nurses, even traveled back to the site of the fire. But it was as if she had never existed. All he remembered was the lavender scent clinging to her uniform and the way her arms held Oliver as if he were her own. That scent had haunted him ever since. In his darkest moments, through grief, rebuilding, raising Oliver alone, Caleb held on to the memory of her, not just out of gratitude, but out of something deeper, something he could never quite explain. She had become more than a memory. She was a symbol of hope, of selflessness, of redemption. And though the world had moved on, Caleb hadn't. Every lavender candle, every medic uniform. Every time Oliver asked about the flower lady, he searched and he waited because some debts cannot be repaid with words, and some promises must be kept. The mountain road twisted through pines and low-lying mist as Caleb guided the black SUV up the final stretch. Oliver, strapped into the back seat, was humming a quiet tune to himself, his eyes fixed on the towering trees beyond the window. Caleb glanced at him through the rear-view mirror, a soft smile touching his lips. "You good back there, buddy?" Oliver nodded. "Are we almost there?" "Almost," Caleb replied. "It's a small clinic. We're testing the new remote defibrillator system. This could help people who live far away from big hospitals, like the lady in the mountains," Oliver asked. Caleb paused. "Yeah, just like that." The facility was little more than a 2-story wooden building nestled between ridges surrounded by tall grasses and wild flowers. A hand-painted sign read "Medical Post." The air was cool, laced with the crisp scent of pine and something faintly floral, something familiar. Inside, nurses in green scrubs moved efficiently through narrow halls. The place was clean but old, kept alive by dedication rather than funding. Caleb spoke briefly with the director, then followed him toward the back office where the on-site coordinator was waiting. The moment he stepped inside, he stopped. A young woman stood at the window, sunlight catching the strands of her tightly tied blonde hair. She wore a plain white coat over her scrubs, sleeves rolled up, clipboard in hand. Her face was turned slightly to the side, high cheekbones, soft jawline, and a calm seriousness in her expression. When she looked up, their eyes met. There was something in the way she held herself, stillness and strength all at once. Caleb felt the air leave his lungs, not in some romantic flash of recognition, but something deeper, something unsettled in his memory. "Mr. Thatcher," the director said, "this is Evelyn Monroe, our lead nurse. She'll be coordinating with your team." Evelyn stepped forward and extended her hand. Her grip was firm, professional. "Mr. Thatcher," she said simply. Caleb shook her hand, his eyes narrowing just slightly. "Have we met before?" Evelyn's smile was polite, measured. "Not that I recall." He nodded slowly, but did not look away. Her voice, her posture. There was something about her that made a ripple pass through him, a name brushing the edge of memory. Oliver slipped his small hand into Caleb's. "Dad," he whispered, tugging at his sleeve. Caleb bent down. "What is it, buddy?" Oliver leaned closer and whispered, just loud enough for his father to hear. "She smells like lavender, just like the lady in the fire." Time stopped. Caleb froze. His breath caught. His eyes darted back to Evelyn, who had clearly heard the words. Her lips parted ever so slightly, and for the first time she looked unsettled. The lavender, he remembered it vividly. Amid all the smoke and chaos that day, the only scent that stood out had been lavender. He had clung to it in his mind, like a rope pulling him back from the edge. The woman who carried his son out of the flames had smelled like lavender. And now Oliver had said it, too. Caleb's voice was low. "Careful. Do you wear lavender oil, Miss Monroe?" Evelyn hesitated. Then, with a slight nod, she replied, "I have for years. It helps keep me calm." "Why?" Their eyes locked. Caleb's heart pounded. "I think we may have met before after all." Evelyn's face paled ever so slightly, but she held his gaze. "If we have, I do not remember." But Caleb was no longer listening to her words. He was watching the flicker in her eyes, the flash of something unspoken. Somewhere deep in her, she remembered, too. Or maybe she had never forgotten. The late afternoon sun filtered through the pine branches, casting golden beams across the quiet clearing behind the clinic. Caleb stood near the entrance of a small wooden cabin where the staff often took breaks, rustic, tucked away, silent. He had asked Evelyn for a moment alone, and to his surprise, she agreed. Inside, the air smelled faintly of tea and wood smoke. A kettle simmered gently on the stove. Evelyn stood by the window, arms crossed, her shoulders tense beneath her white coat. Caleb hesitated before speaking. "I know it was you." Evelyn didn't turn around. "You're mistaken." He stepped closer. "The lavender." Oliver remembered. "And now I remember, too." She remained silent, but her hand unconsciously moved to her forearm, adjusting her sleeve. Caleb caught the movement. Gently, carefully, he reached out and touched her wrist. "May I?" Reluctantly, she nodded. He rolled back the sleeve just enough to see it. A faded thin scar running across her forearm, barely visible. The kind only fire would leave. The shape, the location, it was burned into his memory. "I saw it," he whispered. "When you pulled him from the flames, I saw that exact mark." Evelyn slowly pulled her arm back, covering it again. Her eyes dropped to the floor. "I am not a hero, Mr. Thatcher," she said softly. "I did what any medical professional would have done." Caleb stepped forward, his voice thick. "Do you have any idea what you gave me that day?" He reached for her hand and took it gently in his thumb brushed against her knuckles. "I've looked for you for 3 years," he said, eyes wet with emotion. You saved my boy. You saved my soul. Evelyn's breath caught, but she didn't pull away immediately. Her eyes flickered with something unspoken. Pain maybe, or memory, but after a moment she gently slipped her hand from his grasp. "You don't owe me anything," she said almost too quietly. "It was a moment, a choice, and I've moved on." "No," Caleb said, shaking his head. "You did more than save a life. You gave a broken father something to live for, and I can't pretend like that didn't change everything." She looked at him now, her expression guarded but soft. Caleb steadied himself. "Come to the city," he said. "Work with me. We're launching a humanitarian wing, medical outreach to rural communities. We could use someone with your heart." She blinked. "I don't belong in the city. You'd be helping the places you care about, from a platform that could change more lives than you ever imagined." She opened her mouth to respond, but a small voice cut in. "Miss Evelyn." They both turned. Oliver stood in the doorway, clutching a pine cone in one hand and his stuffed dog in the other. His cheeks were pink from the wind and his eyes were wide. "Can you be my friend again?" he asked, stepping inside. Evelyn knelt instinctively, her hand reaching out to fix the boy's collar. "I never stopped being your friend," she whispered. Oliver leaned in and wrapped his arms around her neck. Caleb watched, a lump rising in his throat. In that moment, he understood something deeper than gratitude. It was not just a thank you he owed her. It was a chance for healing, for redemption, for something quietly beautiful that had been buried beneath ash and silence. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to uncover it. The office Caleb had set up for Evelyn was tucked in a quiet corner of the company's research wing, far from the busy main floor and away from reporters, executives, or anything else that smelled like attention. She had agreed on strict terms. No public appearances, no press releases, no handshakes for cameras, just work, quiet, necessary work. She arrived early each morning, reviewing documents, video calls with field medics, testing prototypes designed for rural clinics. She avoided small talk, never stayed past sunset, and kept her hair tied back in the same tight bun every day, focused, efficient, distant. But Caleb noticed things. How she tensed every time an ambulance wailed outside. How her hands shook ever so slightly when discussing trauma response equipment. How she never mentioned her own training despite clearly being far more experienced than her resume led on. She never spoke of family. Not once, one afternoon, as they sat across from each other reviewing training footage from a pilot program in Montana, Evelyn's wallet slipped from her bag and landed on the floor. Caleb bent to pick it up, meaning only to hand it back, but it fell open in his hand. Inside was a photograph. A man with a kind face holding a small boy who looked to be around 4, grinning with wild blonde curls and peanut butter on his cheek. Evelyn stood beside them, arms wrapped around both. They were laughing. Happy. Caleb froze. When he looked up, Evelyn had gone pale. Her eyes were fixed on the wallet in his hands. She reached out slowly and took it back. "I am sorry," he said gently. "I did not mean to." "It is all right," she whispered. She placed the wallet back into her bag, closed it, and stared at the window for a long moment. "They were my family," she said, voice flat, distant. "My husband, Marcus, and my son, Joshua." Caleb remained quiet, giving her space. "We were driving back from a weekend at the lake. I had worked a double shift the night before. I should have known better. I was exhausted." Her voice cracked. "I fell asleep at the wheel. We hit the guardrail. I woke up in the hospital with a broken wrist and a concussion. She swallowed hard. They were in surgery when I arrived. I stood in the hallway and watched the lights go out above the door. As a nurse, I knew what it meant. I kept telling myself I could do something, anything. But I was just standing there frozen." The silence between them stretched thick with grief. I quit everything after that, she said. The hospitals, the city, the machines. I could not hear the sound of monitors without shaking. I moved north, found work at a volunteer clinic where the air was clean and no one asked questions. I only did the basics. Vitals, dressing wounds, giving medicine to kids with colds. Her voice softened to a whisper. No beeping monitors, no sterile white walls, no more pretending I was strong enough to fix things. Caleb sat still, heart heavy. I lost my wife in a fire, he finally said. I was there and I still could not save her. But you saved my son. Evelyn looked at him then, eyes glistening but not spilling over, and I could not save mine. Her words landed like a stone dropped in a still pond, quiet, but endless in its ripples. That evening, after she left, Caleb sat alone in the office long after dark. He stared at the door she had walked through, his mind replaying every look, every pause, every tremor in her voice. She had buried her pain beneath silence and lavender. But now he knew. Her wounds had never healed. And yet somehow she was still saving others. The morning started quietly like most others. Evelyn was in her small corner office reviewing updates from the Montana pilot program. Outside the window, the city moved in its usual rhythm. Honking horns, people in suits, the occasional wail of a distant ambulance. She tried not to flinch when the sound echoed through the glass. Caleb was in a boardroom down the hall, deep in a quarterly review meeting, surrounded by executives and legal teams. He had left Oliver with the housekeeper in the company's family lounge, a comfortable space with toys, books, and snacks. But routines are fragile things. Around mid-morning, Evelyn stood to stretch when she heard footsteps racing down the corridor. The housekeeper burst in pale and panicked. "It's Oliver. Something's wrong. He ate a muffin. He's swelling up." "Canaphylaxis," Evelyn snapped. "Where's his EpiPen?" The housekeeper stammered. "I don't know. Caleb always carries it." Without wasting another second, Evelyn scooped Oliver into her arms. "Call ahead to City Memorial. Tell them I'm bringing in a 5-year-old male. Severe allergic reaction. No EpiPen administered." "But City Memorial?" The woman hesitated. "Isn't that how?" Evelyn said. Her voice didn't waver. She bolted from the building. The hospital loomed ahead like a memory she had buried alive. As the cab raced through traffic, Evelyn clutched Oliver tightly, whispering to him, "You're going to be okay. Just hold on. I've got you." The boy's breathing grew shallower. Evelyn felt sweat on her back, not from heat, but from fear. Not for herself, for him. She had sworn years ago never to set foot inside a major hospital again. The beeping monitors, the sterile white walls, the flashing red trauma signs. It was where she had lost everything. But this boy, this child with the same curious eyes, the same soft curls as her own Joshua. He had cracked something open in her. And love always demands courage. When they arrived at the ER, Evelyn burst through the doors. Severe anaphylaxis. No EpiPen given. Nurses swarmed them. A stretcher appeared. A doctor began shouting orders, but Evelyn stayed by Oliver's side, holding his hand, refusing to leave the room. Minutes stretched into forever. Then finally he stirred. His eyes blinked open, unfocused. Slowly they found her face. "You," he whispered voice, "you saved me again. And breathe." Evelyn's heart stopped. She dropped everything and ran. The boy was slumped on the couch in the lounge, face flushed and eyes wide with fear. His lips were turning blue. A half-eaten muffin sat nearby. Walnut pieces scattered beside it. Evelyn's throat closed. She smoothed his hair back, forcing a trembling smile. "No," she whispered back. "You saved me." Behind her, the doors opened. Caleb rushed in, his face stricken, tie half loosened, panic etched into every feature. He froze when he saw Evelyn sitting beside his son, her hand in his tears silently streaming down her cheeks. "I came as fast as he began, breathless. Evelyn stood slowly, stepping aside to let him reach Oliver. "He's okay," she said. "We got here in time." Caleb turned to her, his eyes softened, filled with something deeper than gratitude, something aching. "Reverend, you brought him here?" he asked. Evelyn nodded, her voice quiet. "I had to." He looked around. The very hospital she had once told him she could never return to. And yet here she stood. Because of Oliver. Because somewhere deep inside, her heart still knew how to fight for someone she loved. And perhaps for the first time in years, she had found someone worth fighting for again. The morning broke with tension in the air. Caleb arrived at the office earlier than usual, greeted by a dozen unread messages, missed calls, and an uncomfortable silence among his staff. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. His assistant approached cautiously, holding a tablet. "You need to see this," she said, avoiding his eyes. Caleb took it and stared at the headline splashed across a gossip site already going viral. "Mountain Nurse Charms CEO. Is this a corporate fairy tale or calculated climb?" Underneath a photo, Evelyn rushing through the ER doors with Oliver in her arms. Her face, clear as day, was captured mid-stride, eyes focused, arms protective. To anyone who did not know the context, it looked like the perfect tabloid image. The article was worse. It spun a narrative of an unknown backwoods nurse who conveniently appeared in the life of America's most eligible widowed CEO, hinting at opportunism, questioning her motives, and even suggesting a secret romance staged for sympathy. Caleb's jaw clenched. His phone buzzed with calls from board members, publicists, even his legal team. Everyone wanted a response. Damage control, but he said nothing. He stared at the screen, silent. Then, without a word, he tossed the tablet onto his desk and walked out of the room. Evelyn read the article at the same time. In the quiet break room near her workspace. The words stabbed deeper than she expected. Not because they were cruel, but because they came from nowhere, and yet they had a grain of believability to them, at least in the eyes of those who did not know her. When she saw the photo, her and Oliver, it felt like betrayal. The hospital run had been instinct, not performance. She had not even known a camera was nearby, but someone had captured it, twisted it, and now plastered her face across newsstands and online feeds. And Caleb, nothing. No statement, no denial, no public defense, not even a call, just silence. By noon, she had packed her bag. She left her badge and access card on the desk, left no note, and quietly exited through the side elevator to avoid anyone noticing. The press was already lingering near the lobby. She did not go back to the apartment Caleb had arranged for her. She went straight to the bus station. By the time Caleb returned to the office after a long closed-door meeting with PR, Evelyn was gone. He checked her desk, empty. He called her phone, disconnected. Only one thing remained behind, a folded sheet of paper she had left with the receptionist. No letter, just a copy of a photograph. The same photo from her wallet, her husband, her son, and her. And in the corner, Evelyn had scribbled in shaky handwriting. "Some people are not meant to be saved twice." Caleb sat down slowly, the paper trembling in his hands. It was not the article that had broken her. It was his silence. He had been so consumed with optics, with protecting the company's image, that he forgot what truly mattered. He forgot her. Forgot the woman who had walked through fire for his child twice, and now she had vanished again. Only this time, he knew exactly what he had lost, and it would take more than words to bring her back. The conference room was packed, cameras flashing, reporters murmuring in anticipation. Caleb stood at the podium, dressed not in his usual tailored suit, but in a dark sweater and a worn coat, his expression raw, tired, but resolute. A large screen behind him showed the viral tabloid headline that had caused the storm. He did not flinch at the image of Evelyn and Oliver frozen in a grainy frame. He cleared his throat and began. "I know many of you have seen this photo, and I know the rumors that have followed it." He paused, letting the silence settle. "But let me tell you the truth." Reporters leaned forward. "That woman in the photo is not some stranger who wandered into our lives with ambition or an agenda. She is the person who saved my son's life twice. The first time in a wildfire 3 years ago when I thought I would lose everything, and again just days ago when Oliver suffered a medical emergency." He glanced down, then back up, his voice steady. "But she did more than save him. She reminded me what it means to feel, to care, to trust again. She is not just the woman who saved my son a breath. She is the woman who taught me how to live again." Cameras clicked, but no one interrupted. "I stayed silent when I should have spoken. I let fear and reputation matter more than truth and heart. And because of that, she left. Not for attention, not for scandal, but because I failed her." He stepped back from the podium. "That is all I have to say." And with that, he walked off the stage, leaving behind a room full of stunned silence. Hours later, Caleb drove through winding roads, blanketed in white. Snow fell softly around them, flakes catching in the beams of the headlights. Oliver sat in the back seat, quiet, bundled in a navy coat. A small box clutched tightly in his hands. "Are we close, Dad?" he asked. Caleb nodded. "I think so." They reached the familiar trailhead just past midnight. The cabin was half a mile in, remote, tucked deep into the forest. They walked together, hand in hand, as the world lay hushed beneath snow. When they reached the clearing, the cabin lights were off. Caleb hesitated, unsure. But Oliver stepped forward. "She's home. I can feel it." He marched to the front porch and placed the small box carefully on the steps. Then he turned, motioning for Caleb to come closer. Inside the box was a simple bracelet made from string and colored bottle caps, the same kind Evelyn had once crafted for Oliver years ago while comforting him during a fever at the mountain clinic. It was a memory only he would have kept. Caleb crouched beside his son. "What do you want to say to her?" Oliver thought for a moment, then whispered, "Thank you for saving me, but please don't go away again." Caleb's throat tightened. They stood there for a few minutes longer, snow landing in their hair, their coats on the little box. Then they turned and began the slow walk back to the car. Inside the cabin, behind drawn curtains, Evelyn watched through the frosted glass, motionless. One hand pressed to her lips, the other clutching her chest. She had seen the press conference. She had told herself it was too late. But then came the man and the boy, and the bracelet made from pieces of something broken turned into something whole again. And suddenly the snow outside was not so cold. The snow was falling harder now. A quiet hush blanketing the trees and earth in white. The porch light above the cabin flickered to life just as Caleb stepped into the clearing. His breath came in clouds, visible in the cold air, but he did not seem to notice. His coat was soaked with snow. His knees hit the ground slowly, purposefully in front of the small wooden steps where the bracelet still sat in its box. He looked up at the darkened windows, heart thudding. Inside, Evelyn hesitated by the door, hand resting on the handle. She had not meant to open it, but something in her chest, something fragile and loud, told her to move. And so she did. The door creaked open. A gust of cold wind swept in. She stepped out, her bare feet brushing against the snow-covered wood. Her hair was loose, falling over her shoulders. She wore a thick cardigan over a flannel shirt, and her breath caught when she saw him. Caleb was kneeling in the snow, looking up at her with eyes she had once tried to forget. He smiled, not the polished smile he wore in magazines, but something softer. Honest. "You saved me once, Evelyn," he said, voice thick with emotion. "Not just from that fire, but from what came after, from forgetting how to feel. She shook her head, tears already brimming. You saved my son. You gave me a reason to keep going. And when I stayed silent, when I let the world hurt you, he paused, snow catching in his lashes. I realized I never stopped being afraid of loss, of letting someone in again. But I'm not afraid now. He stood slowly and stepped toward her. Let me protect you, he whispered. Every single day. For a moment, Evelyn could not breathe. Her heart thudded against her ribs. And all the memories came rushing in. The fire, the hospital, the silence, the guilt. And then Oliver's face, his laughter, his tiny arms wrapping around her. And now Caleb standing in the snow waiting, not demanding, not pleading, but offering. She took a step forward and then another. And when Oliver ran from behind the trees, his boots crunching through the snow, his small arms wrapping tightly around her waist, Evelyn finally let go. The tears came, unguarded and silent. She knelt down, pressing her cheek to Oliver's hair, holding him close. Caleb reached out his hand, unsure. She looked up and took it. That night, under the falling snow, they did not speak more than a few words. They did not need to. The silence between them had become a language of its own, one of healing, of forgiveness, of beginning again. 1 year later, the sun streamed through the tall windows of the Willow Haven Center for Healing, casting soft gold over the polished wood floors. The walls were warm earth tones lined with photographs of nature, families, quiet strength. In the front lobby, a new painting had just been framed and hung. Crayon lines, bold colors, a woman in lavender scrubs surrounded by children with flowers in their hands. The Lady of Lavender by Oliver Thatcher, age 6. Below the painting stood Evelyn, now the medical director of the center, greeting a mother and her teenage daughter who had come in for counseling. At the end of the hallway, Caleb leaned against the doorframe, a cup of coffee in hand. He watched Evelyn laugh gently, touch a shoulder, offer reassurance. He still wore the title of CEO, but spent most of his time overseeing the foundation's work, funding clinics, mental health programs, outreach teams. He no longer chased profit. He chased purpose. When Evelyn turned and saw him, their eyes met. She smiled. He smiled back. And somewhere nearby, a boy's laughter echoed through the hall. They had all been broken once, but here in this place they built together. They were whole again. Thank you for watching this heartwarming journey of love, loss, and healing. If this story touched your soul, reminded you of the power of second chances, or simply made you believe in the quiet strength of compassion, then this is exactly why we tell stories. At Soul-Stirring Stories, we're here to bring you more tales that move your heart and stay with you long after the screen fades to black. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that hype button to support our channel so we can continue sharing powerful emotional stories that heal, inspire, and remind us all what it means to be human. Until next time, take care of your heart and never stop believing in kindness.